Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauren, a 4-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. Hey, everybody. So we are continuing on with our June series, Men and Money. And today I'm excited to have Shawn Hames here to share his money memoir with us. When graduating high school, Shawn had to make a decision. He could pursue a college education or he could start working his way up in the family business. He chose the latter and has not looked back. But don't think he was handed some cushy job because his father owned the business. His dad made him work for every dollar, and it's an experience he now appreciates. Shawn and his sister bought the company from their dad in 2019, and now they have 6 locations and do roughly $13 million in annual revenue. Shawn is going to share with us some important lessons he learned through hard work and personal experiences about handling both his business and personal finances. He is also going to give us some great business tips that every man and woman can learn from. Let's listen to Shawn as he shares his money memoir. Shawn, I am so excited to have you on the show today.
Yeah, so glad to be able to do this.
Well, let's just start by backing up a little bit and learning a little bit about you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from, what kind of environment you grew up in? Let's just start at the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, so I was born in Nebraska in a small town, and my parents, when I was 2, they moved to the Dallas area, and I've pretty much lived here ever since. So we would go visit from time to time back to Nebraska, but for the most part, Dallas-Fort Worth has been where I've lived pretty much the entire time.
Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have 2 sisters and 3 brothers.
Oh, so a big family.
Yeah.
And what were your parents doing for a living?
So when they first moved to Dallas, they had a chance to get into like real estate management, real estate buying and selling, sometimes stuff they would hold, stuff they would flip. And that's sort of where they got started. And later on years, they got more into my dad. He started a business that my sister and myself own right now. But in the beginning, it was real estate. He did whatever he had to do to make ends meet. He drove a trash truck for a period of time all around the city. And it actually was convenient for him because it helped him to understand all the different parts of the city, opportunities, stuff like that, because he got lots of experience driving around.
That's pretty cool. So from humble beginnings to entrepreneurial lifestyle that went really well. So what was it like kind of in the household as it pertains to money? Were there discussions about money? What do you remember about childhood memories of money?
Probably the first memory, I was probably 8 or 9. Probably my favorite house from growing up we were living in. And I was walking with my dad, and he was telling me about right now we're just making so much money and things are so successful. And that seemed to be like the high point. Then after that, that was back in the mid 80s. And in the Dallas area, things just absolutely fell apart from a financial side. So he went from making 6 figures, had like 30, 40, 50 houses. He had these particular loans that were cheap in the beginning, but then they would balloon out. But he was selling his houses so fast, it didn't matter. And when the real estate market came to a halt, he lost everything. So he went from sort of rich family, nice house, nice cars, to very quickly within just a couple of years, he pretty much lost everything and had a ton of debt. And our big thing at that point in time, whenever we sort of recovered and got to a point where at least he was stable, the 4 of us would be able to go and have a large pizza, one night a week to split. That was the big event of the week from that standpoint.
What do you remember feeling during that time as a child that was kind of living through that, and it wasn't your responsibility necessarily to earn at that time and you just kind of had to stand by and watch it?
It was hard from that standpoint. Around that time, my mom and dad got divorced. I was on a soccer team. You had the soccer moms and soccer dads. They were all there together, hanging out. We would do stuff on the weekends. We'd have different events. And when that whole thing fell apart, the finances dried up. And then with my mom and dad getting divorced, those friendship and relationships sort of dried up. We weren't in the upper echelon, I guess you would say, at that point in time. So it was hard from that standpoint. It wasn't about the money, but it was more about the relationships that we sort of lost over it. And I guess you can look back and say, are those fair weather friends? Was that part of the problem? It was tough from that standpoint.
Yeah, I would say that that is a really tough time to have to live through. Is like you said, you have this social circle, you have a lifestyle that you're accustomed to. And not only is the lifestyle taken away, but friendship is supposed to be something that is not predicated upon finances. But we find out that social circles do change based on your ability to even just be in the space. Can we go on those same vacations with those friends and sort of things? And so changes that happen as it relates to that. All right. So what about work for you? When did you start to earn an income? What was your first job? Do you remember kind of what you were doing?
Yeah. My dad, a lot of the story is going to revolve around him. So he was an entrepreneurial guy. He had the huge success in real estate, and then all came crashing down on him. He came up with this idea. Before he got into real estate, he would go around to apartment complexes, and they would pull carpet out that was basically brand new. And he would go and take that carpet, and he'd put like an ad in the newspaper, classified ad, and he would sell it. So when he was struggling just to make ends meet, he's like, man, there's got to be a better way. I've lost everything. I'm $150,000 in debt. How am I going to get out of this? That idea came back to him and said, is there a way I could find some of this used carpet and sell it again? So he went back to some of the apartment complexes that he had been to in the past, and he discovered that they were still doing the same type of thing. He got some of that out of the dumpster. He's basically getting free material, and he's turning around and selling it and installing it, and he made like $300. And for him at that point in time, that was like, oh my goodness, this is a godsend. So he built it into a used carpet company called New to You Carpets, selling used carpet. So that was my first job. At 13 years old, I'm going around with him in his beat up pickup truck. At one point in time, I think it was blue on the back end and the front end was red. And here's a dumpster. We would go around to the flooring companies, and there's a dumpster. And okay, son, climb the dumpster and help get the stuff out. And we're going to put on the back of the truck. There were other times that we would go and we'd find commercial spaces in downtown Dallas. We'd go up the elevators, and they were just demoing a floor. And there was all the carpet, and we'd pay a little bit for the carpet, and we'd have to pull it all up. So we'd get day laborers, and it was my responsibility to go in and help run these day laborers to get the material out. I'd have to pull the stuff out myself too as well, and we'd go and do that. So I did that for quite a few summers. I would do that during spring break, stuff like that.
That is super cool. Do you remember what your pay was? Did you have to negotiate really hard with your dad? Or was it just like, this is what you make because I said so?
No, it was like $3 an hour. This is below minimum wage. I think it was probably like until I was like 15. It was like I got $1 an hour raise per year. So look at that. So the next year, so first year was $3 an hour. Next year is $4 an hour. The next year is $5 an hour. I think the laws at this point in time and so far in the past that he can't be held responsible for the child labor. But yeah, if somebody had been in the know about that, that definitely would have got shut down.
Statute of limitations is up.
Right. Statute of limitations, that's the right word I was looking for. But yeah, it was cheap. But the thing is it wasn't that he couldn't pay me more. He basically said, this is what your value is to do this type of work. You're young. Your work ethic probably isn't as good. You're not as strong as some of the other people. And I'm going to pay you this. And you're going to be happy to do it. You're going to do it as part of the family. So as I got older, he paid me more and more and more. I was only going to get paid what I was worth. I wasn't going to get paid more. I was not getting thrown a bone because I was the owner's son or he was my dad. But the reality is that he was going to go on and make sure that I got what I was worth at that point in time and not a penny more.
This is a lesson in value, not so much as it is cost. And the things that you learned from even that experience as well are probably pretty valuable and something that you could take into the next phase of life.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's not anything I would trade about that at all. It was something I really learned that I wasn't going to just be handed something in my life, that it was going to be something that I was going to have to work for. Anything that I wanted, I was going to have to work for it. My dad was going to come there with a handout. At that point in time, things were really tough for them financially. But as I grew older and older and older, there wasn't like, here, you're my son, I'm going to give you this, that, or the other. I'm going to give you an easier road. You did the hard road. And I think that was real important for me to develop character that I'm not sure how would have come about otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. The lessons that you can learn from doing those sorts of things. So, what happened next then? You said that was a 13, 14 kind of range. When you hit 18 and adulthood, was college in your future? Did you do something else? What did the first round of adult life look like for you?
I worked for my dad at the carpet company, and I really didn't see much of his future there because it was used carpet. It was very, very labor intensive. It was difficult to source the product. It was on the cheap end, so it didn't really attract me that much. And he found out about a franchise. It was actually a used carpet franchise out of Kansas City. He went and looked into it and investigated. He decided to join the franchise because he thought he was going to have this opportunity for tons and tons of used carpet that he'd get from around the country to keep his business going. Well, it wasn't but maybe 6 months into that he discovered that he could buy new carpet at a very affordable rate. It's closeout, discontinued items, specials, stuff like that. And he could make pretty good money doing that. And when I saw the opportunity for that, and the fact that it wasn't going to be so labor intensive like the used carpet was, and that we can move into new carpet, and it's something that was repeatable over and over and over, I thought about it. I'm like, here's my different options. I can go to school, I can work real hard and I can get the grades, try to pursue becoming get in the medical field. Maybe I want to become a lawyer. But here's the reality. I was smart enough to do those things, but it would have been a ton of schoolwork, a lot of school debt. And here 10 to 12 years later, I'd finally be out of school, ready to go. And yeah, I'm going to make a great income at that point in time. Or I could go this route with my dad, work hard for him, knowing that at some point in time I'd have the opportunity to buy a business that could go in and provide a great livelihood for myself and my family from there forward. And I wouldn't have to go through all the education to do it, and it would basically learn on the job. So straight out of high school, I went and joined the family business. And at that point in time, I think I had like a second location we had added on, but I knew that this thing could grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and it is something that could really be duplicatable, and it could be a great opportunity for me. And I was excited about the prospect of having something that could help choose a direction that we're going to go, and it's been a great ride. And I've pretty much been here ever since.
Okay, so we kept that business. After real estate happened, we started the carpet business, and that's the business you're still in. What's the name of the company, and how long have you been with them?
I graduated in 94. The company at that point in time was originally called Big Bob's New and Used Carpet Shops. We left the franchise in 2011 and we changed our name to Ideal Floors. And then my sister and I, together, we bought the business here in May of 2018. So we've been the proud owners now for 2 years.
That is awesome. Congratulations. Way to see it through.
There was definitely times in the beginning when I started full time straight out of high school, I was a warehouse guy. There was a lot of character building from that standpoint. Underneath carpet, you have your carpet padding, and it had to be baled. So, like if you've ever seen cardboard boxes being baled, like at grocery stores, well, they do the same thing with carpet padding. So, just imagine coming back from these houses. Sometimes there's animals that were living on the carpet, so you could have potentially like pee and urine on it, but it's got to be baled. And then whenever they send it to the company to recycle it, they're going to sanitize and everything, but it's not sanitized when you're dealing with it. So I had, for years, I was the leader of who had baled the most things in the history of the company because I had done it so many years. Like I'd get out of high school at 3 o'clock, and for 3 to 6, I'd be baling pad. Wherever I came to start working full time, that was part of my responsibility to bale pad. So once again, character building. And you sit there and you think, is this worth it? I mean, surely I can be doing something better than this. But once again, it gave me the chance, opportunity to start from the bottom and understand what it is that the staff go through, the challenges, the heat, how tired you can get, how cold it can get during the winter. And it really gave me an empathy to help to sort of understand that I'm glad that I have today because I can really understand what it is they've gone through because I lived it myself during those early years.
Yeah, I frequently hear that the best CEOs are those who have built the business from the ground up because, like you said, they have that empathy and they have that ability to really create a company culture that is inclusive as opposed to kind of swooping in as a big investor or something like that. So you mentioned that, like you said, at 94, there was like $2 million of revenue and you guys have grown over to $13 million of revenue. People might hear those numbers and go, wow, you're rich. But I think what sometimes people miss out on when they think about business ownership is that revenue is not the same thing as profit. And also that salary is a part of an expense. So can you just talk a little bit about the idea that revenue is the top line, but what goes into before you get to the bottom line?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And it's something I've discussed with my staff here a lot as well because it is a misnomer. People hear, oh my goodness, I mean, we're doing $13 million a year. You must be a millionaire. I'm not a millionaire by any stretch of the imagination because the thing is, there's so many expenses that go into that. For us, I mean, we're in situations where some years our net profit will be 1, 2, 3% from that standpoint. So if you're talking about, let's just take 1%. And for those who aren't very familiar with that concept, what net profit is, if I sell $100, out of that $100, what I get to keep and take home in my pocket is $1. So from that standpoint, that's a lot of effort. That's a lot of effort to go in and do all this. You got to have staffing, you got to have buildings, you got to have materials, you got to pay the electric bill and trash and advertising and all that stuff. So you're going to get all the $100 of revenue coming in, and you only get $1 of that. And obviously, if we get up to $13 million, in that situation, 1% is $130,000. But you have to do everything right. If things start to go sideways, and they can really quickly, right now we've gone through COVID-19 here pretty quick, and our revenue dropped immediately when everything started shutting down, shelter at home and stuff like that. People were very scared to even go out. That becomes hard. When you start talking about that your net profits, 1, 2, 3%, pretty low, and now all of a sudden your revenue is dropping by 30, 40%, that's a very scary thing. You got to figure it out pretty quickly or else you're going to go under. So it's something that people need to understand because, oh, well, you did $1 million in a month. You must be making all this money. No, we did $1 million, but we also spent a lot of money on salaries, spent a lot of money on rent. A lot of that cost went towards material. A lot of that cost went towards people installing the product. So there's so many other things that go into that. I was talking to a guy and he was saying, yeah, I went out and started my own business. I worked for you for a while, but now I've got my own thing. And yeah, this past year I did $340,000. But in his mind, the way he was communicating is he thought he's making big time six figures. You have to figure in all your expenses. And if you don't, that's a huge, huge, huge problem. And not only that, there's other things you have to factor in and you have to watch because you can be profitable on paper, but if you don't have cash in your bank account because people owe you money, from that standpoint, it doesn't really matter. If you can't pay your bills, you can't pay your staff, it's all for naught.
So frequently people are interested in business ownership and leaving their 9 to 5, but I think sometimes they forget to take into consideration that the company has to earn quite a bit to pay them the salary in addition to keep the lights on at that company, to keep the building that they're coming to, rents paid, etc. And all that goes into it. And they think it's just going to be like whatever I make goes home. And so I really appreciate you sharing the breakdown of how there's a lot of expenses that go in, and revenue is not the end all be all, but it's where you start and then you got to subtract some things first.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably a lot of people have heard about restaurants, like the failure for smaller restaurants is extreme. You have a man or you have a woman that they do a great job cooking some type of food. Maybe it could be fried chicken. Maybe they're great at cooking Asian food. Maybe they're great at cooking some type of Mexican food, down south food, whatever it is, they're great at it. And people are like, man, this food is awesome. I mean, you do a great job, and you should open up a restaurant. Well, the thing is, just because they're great at making food and they make an awesome omelet does not mean that they have the business sense to go and make it happen. And you got to factor it all in. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you're going to be a good business person. So it's something that people really need to think about. And they need to think about, am I willing to do, how am I going to advertise? How am I going to get people in the store? Am I good with money? Do I mind paying bills? Do I know how to pay bills? Do I have a system for that? So the thing is, you really have to come to grips with that. For me, it's all about processes and organization and really being able to understand the numbers and how things impact. It's not because I have this great knowledge for flooring why we're successful. That's just a small piece of the puzzle. It's all the business sense that really makes the world go around and makes us successful or not successful from that standpoint. So anybody who's looking at potentially starting a business for the future, not trying to discourage you, but really count the cost. Really count the cost and say, do you want to be able to do these things? Don't just have a good idea or a great widget, but do you have the commitment to go and do the hard work to do those other things that you don't know about? A balance sheet, profit and loss statement, gross profit margins, stuff like that. And once you sort of got a grip on that, you get some coaching, some mentoring, read some books, get some good understanding of how these things work, then go at it. But don't just say because you have a great product that everything's going to work out, because that's only one piece of the business.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point too, in that, like you said, education goes a really long way. I mean, you've already mentioned that you didn't go get a traditional education. So you're the CEO of a company that didn't go MBA, college, school route, but you still had to get education. So can you talk a little bit about some of those things that you took advantage of over time, or how your dad educated you so that you could learn, like you said, all the various aspects of the business and not just the flooring aspect?
Sure. Yeah, it absolutely was about understanding that you don't know everything and being growth minded. I would just absorb whatever information that I could put my hands on. From the flooring side, from the very beginning, day one, there was a book and it talked about all the different ways the carpet was made and this type of carpet, that type of carpet. The thing is, I chose myself. My dad didn't say, read this book and turn a report on me. I wanted to know the information. I wanted to get better. So the same thing happened for all the different aspects of the business. When we were part of the franchise, there was different groups and stuff that we'd have the chance to go to. And what I would do is I would go and find the guys who are the most successful in the room, and I would go and ask them questions. I didn't go and say, oh, yeah, I'm doing this. Oh, yeah, listen to me about this. I found that I was learning so much information, finding people wiser than me, and they would coach me and they would mentor me. I'd have a chance in different times to catch them at breakfast, catch them at lunch, catch them at dinner, and I'm just talking their ear off. Not talking about the latest sports that are going on or what's going on with politics or what's going on society at large, but I was very, very laser focused about what makes you successful. And then taking that in my mind and thinking, okay, how can I apply that? How can I apply that? How can I apply that? So I took those opportunities very, very seriously. And that was my education, so much of it, so much so. And really just working through it and trying to figure out what are the things that they were made them successful. What are the things that they failed at? And what can I learn from their failures? So understanding that I don't have all the answers was important, and that I needed to look outside for that mentoring and coaching. And that was just tremendous. There was definitely some books that I read to go in and make sure I understood the financial side, to understand the cash flow, to understand the balance sheet, how those type of things worked. But it was those one-on-one conversations that really helped me so much to understand how to motivate employees, how to compensate people, how to interact with customers, the importance of customer service. And those things were crucial to my education. And it wasn't done in a classroom, but it was done across a table during breakfast, lunch, and dinner so often, and having conversations with them on the phone and stuff like that. Just being open. I mean, that's the thing, is just being open, saying, I want to learn, and not thinking that you know it all.
Yeah, relationships are such a key part of obtaining knowledge and growing a business. Yeah, I think that's super cool. You also mentioned that you bought the business from your parents. So you and your sister bought this business. You weren't gifted a business. So that's another thing people think of, is like, oh, big fancy business, already successful, give it to my kids. Can you talk a little bit about what goes into purchasing a business and what are the key factors there?
Sure, absolutely. So on my dad's side of the family, there's four siblings. So I'm the oldest, and then my sister, and I have two brothers who are about 15 years younger than I am. So there was some discussion about what's going to happen. And the reality is, what was fair? What was fair is that if he was going to hand it off to me or to my sister, because we both work in the business, that really wouldn't be fair to the other siblings. And the reality is, he's built up all this equity over the years, and how is he going to make money? I mean, he's obviously made money over the years, but going into retirement, what's going to be fair for him? And the same thing I talked about in the very beginning, he didn't give me anything. He didn't buy me a car. He didn't buy me a house. He didn't do any of that. I mean, he basically, everything that I have, I worked for, and the same thing was going to be for the business. So I've saved up some money. My sister, we both saved up some money, but it's not enough to buy a business that's doing $13 million in revenue a year. So what we did is we started going around to some banks to see what can we do in regarding an SBA loan to be able to do that. And what would happen in that situation is we get the SBA loan, We would do the purchase. That money would obviously go to him, so he'd be able to cash out on his part of the business, and then we'd be able to own the business, and we would pay the business off over a 10-year time period. So we had to put a certain amount of money down that was required as part of the SBA loan to basically say that we're invested in this. And then in this particular case, because of the amount of equity and what the bank was willing to do, is there was a certain part that the bank was willing to loan on it, and there was a certain part that we had to basically pay my dad directly for the business. So we go through the whole process. It's a lot of paperwork. They want a lot of information. They want to know a lot about our personal finances. They want to know about our experience in the business, because the bank is just getting introduced to us. So they don't know if my dad's had this business for 20 plus years, and now all of a sudden here over the past 6 months we have an interest in it, but we don't have any background. We don't have any business background. We don't know anything about flooring, from that standpoint. But our experience was very important to give the bank confidence. And I guess one thing that I really didn't understand until I got into this process is I thought of bankers as being just numbers guys, that they're going to just look at the numbers and do the numbers make sense. And what I've found is that couldn't be farther from the truth. That really, when you're dealing with a bank, it really is a sales job. I'm not saying to do anything dishonest, but they want to hear a vision. They want to hear a future. They want to see somebody who's passionate and excited, that thinks that they can make this the greatest thing around town. So I would say, like, one of the first bankers that I talked to, I sort of realized my mistake. I was more focused on numbers. I was having some frank conversations, and I really wasn't casting a lot of vision, and there wasn't a lot of excitement. And I think with the bankers, they were sort of thinking, is this a good idea? Maybe that's not the best way to present it. So when I had my second go around that we went and talked to another bank, I realized my error from the first time, and I really cast the vision of how awesome this could be and why they want to partner with us and how we're going to help to make that bank money. That this SBA loan is going to be a great thing for them. This can be a great partnership. We're going to be putting cash in their coffers, and it's going to be a win-win-win all the way around. The second time around, when I looked at my second opportunity, it went so much better. And that was really important from that standpoint. So we had to get all of our stuff in line. So personally, myself and my sister, we both have pretty clean personal finances. That really helped us to get the loan. And then also just our experience and knowledge base in the business we were going to be buying was crucial in giving the bank confidence. The other thing that we were able to do is we negotiated at that point in time to do a line of credit immediately. And I understood how important lines of credit are. And for people who don't know what that is, basically there's an asset that you're going to have in your business. It could be your accounts receivable, the money that people owe you. It could be inventory that you've purchased. And the bank is going to give you a certain percentage on credit towards that. So you can have a line of credit as low as $50,000 up to several $1,000,000. So in this particular case, it was very important for us when we got the SBA that we wanted to have a line of credit just to give us that flexibility up front. During our slow time of the season, we'd be able to go and draw down that line of credit to be able to make payroll or to pay vendors and stuff like that. But then on the time of the year when we get the cash is flowing in and we got plenty of cash, then you pay down the line of credit so you're not having to pay interest on it. So it's something that goes up and down, up and down, up and down. So that was very important, because the thing is, with the line of credit, after we've done the SBA, if we hadn't negotiated that and got that in place already, when you get an SBA, the bank has the first position and nobody else is going to give you a line of credit after that. So you're sort of beholden to the bank. So it's important for us that when we started this whole process that we negotiated that line of credit and got that in place, because otherwise you'd just be sort of at their whim whether we'd have that or not, and it would make things so much more difficult for us when we go through those tough times. In a COVID-19 situation, you want to have that line of credit for that so you can make it through those month, 2 months, 3 months that are having a rough time. Whereas if you don't have that set up and now things are going bad, banks aren't going to, oh yeah, things are going terrible. Here, let me give you some money to help you through this difficult time. That becomes so much more difficult. So you want to be very strategic up front to try to protect yourself and prepare for that. The hard times are going to come no matter what economy you're in. Eventually, hard times are going to come.
Yeah. It sounds like you learned so much through, like you said, just actually doing. But what I really appreciate is the transparency of what you're sharing, because these gems are very, very important for someone out there that's listening, that is interested in starting a business and doesn't know all the things that are happening behind the scenes, doesn't know that relationships are just as important as a number. So yes, there is going to be an application process. There is some criteria, but also there's human connection. We are still interacting with one another on a regular basis. And like you said, you need to be able to sell yourself in addition to having the finances buttoned up. And it's been really cool that you've been able to do this with your family, from your dad starting it to you and your sister purchasing it. And so I'd love to transition to Father's Day is approaching. You've got some kiddos. You talked about having the clean and buttoned up personal finances. How are you taking the things that you've learned and the methods and the habits that you have and sharing those with your children? What do you talk to your kids about as it pertains to money? And are you hoping that they'll take over the business someday in the future?
I don't know any of them would really be interested in taking over the business, but that's okay. For my wife and I, we don't want them to do what we want them to do. We want them to do what they feel passionate about. And if some of them have an interest in the business and they really have that desire to do that someday, that'd be great and fine. Right now, they really haven't shown that kind of interest, but that's okay. But regarding them and how we raise them, it's a danger that's out there that if people have money, they love their children and they want to bless their children. They want to give them all kinds of nice things, the latest gaming system, the newest phone, the nicest clothes. As they get older, get them a great car and stuff like that. And I think that really is a dangerous thing. I'm not saying you can't love your children when giving them gifts in some form or fashion, but be cautious, because I've seen so many people that, in my opinion, they've really done a disservice to their children handing them so much. And maybe that's just my perspective. I appreciate the way that I was raised. I appreciate me having to earn everything that I got. But for us and our kids, my wife and I's kids, we're very disciplined about these are some chores and you're going to get very minimal money, because we want them to understand that hard work is important and you just don't want to just be handed anything, that you need to work diligently to get what it is that you want to have for life. We talk to them about delayed gratification. We try to encourage them saving as much of the money that they do earn. And we're not just throwing money at them saying, hey, go do this, go do that, go do this, go do that. But we're really trying to help them understand the value of money so they'll respect it. And I really feel like that's going to help them as they grow into their adult lives.
Yeah, I think those are all really important lessons. Like you said, this idea of delayed gratification and just even having those conversations with them about saving. So kudos to you. While we're talking family, you mentioned your wife, and sometimes it's hard is as we think about men and money to kind of come together as a household and have financial conversations. So is it a group kind of effort as you guys think about finances, or how do you have conversations with your wife about here's where we're going, here's what we're planning, or how does that go?
So I'm the primary breadwinner of the household. She runs a nonprofit. So she does bring some income in from that standpoint. But I think the thing that's crucial, and there's probably a lot of men, if they listen to this podcast, that they are the breadwinner, or maybe they make a lot more than what their spouse is. And I guess what I would want to express so much is this is a team effort. If you have kids, if I want to go in and say what my wife did to raise as being the person that was the primary caregiver for our kids, if you wanted to go and say, look, we're going to hire a maid, we're going to hire a nanny, we're going to hire somebody to go in and help run the household, the amount of money that you'd have to pay to have all of those different people would be just incredible. And here you have a spouse who's doing all those things, and in some ways it's almost considered to be free. That's just what they do, and they're not getting paid any money to that. So if you are the primary caregiver or primary breadwinner, and your wife is the one who's doing some of the other things, you got to give some value to that. You got to give a lot of value to that. So when it comes down to money, I hear these stories about the man saying, well, I'm the one who makes the money, so I'm the one that makes the decisions. I cannot disagree with that more. When that money comes to that bank account, I don't see that money as my money. I see that money as our money. And the thing is, we need to have discussions about it. And we need to try to work what we can to come to compromises, not where I'm going to say, well, I'm the man, I'm going to decide how this money is going to be spent. No, this is our money, and how are we going to spend it together? What are the decisions we're going to make together? And we're very transparent. We have one bank account. We don't have any separate bank accounts. And we have conversations that if we're going to be spending over X amount of dollars, we're going to talk to each other about it. Not because somebody's trying to bully the other one, not because one of us is controlling and wants to have that veto power, but it's just about being on the same page and being honest with what's going on. we'll have conversations about if things get tight, saying, hey, we probably need to watch out for this, watch out for our spending and going out to eat. We need to watch out for our spending on entertainment. But we're having those conversations together. I pay the bills, I handle the finances, but it's a conversation that we both have together that really makes it work. I'm grateful that my wife and I have values very similar on the money side. So if you're not married, I definitely encourage you that needs to be part of your discussion whenever you're looking at prospective spouses or spouse, is to make sure you're on the same page money-wise, because that can be a great source of conflict. But if you are married and you're not on the same page, get some counseling. That's really the only way it's going to fix it, because one person being overbearing over another, that's just not right. And to me, you need to be a team, even if you're the one that's making the primary breadwinner, and you need to work as a team to get on that same page. And if not, get some counseling and make sure that counselor is going to help you guys get on the same page, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, we talked a lot about cost. We talked a lot about value, but we need to spend 1 second talking about investment. And the investment in counseling is something that can pay dividends and returns that go far beyond measure. So this podcast is all about having money discussions, open and transparent. And in my practice, I run into that frequently, where households are managing their finances separately, and that is a form of distrust. I just want to make sure I'm okay if, or I just want to make sure in case. And those are things that are best dealt with a counselor, because everybody has a whole money history and a set of money messages that they've encountered during life. But those things can be very, very destructive to a relationship. So don't be afraid to invest in a counselor.
Yeah.
This has been an awesome, awesome, awesome conversation, Shawn. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I do want to do what we always do with our guests when we wrap up. It's what I call the final sprint. So I'm going to rapid fire some questions at you, and you answer as you see fit. Are you ready?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. You've got $20 in your pocket right now. What do you spend it on?
Probably pizza. I'm a pizza guy.
Ooh, I love pizza too. I'm actually on this no carb thing right now, so I'd also like to spend my $20 on pizza, but I can't. What is your worst money habit?
Worst money habit. Oh, dear.
Everybody's got one.
So I track our money in Quicken, and I think sometimes I get stuck on trying to track down these little bitty transactions. And it's like a big waste of time, and I make decent money. It's like, do I really need to track down this $5 transaction, this $10 transaction, when there's probably something better I could be doing with that time than trying to figure that the minutia of this type of details.
Yes, time is valuable and there is a cost to it. And I'm also a get stuck in the weeds kind of person, so I can relate to that. What would you say is your best money habit?
Just discipline. I think it's important to be disciplined and to not just be cavalier about money. When you look at expenses, if there's a way that you can save money to do that, I mean, it needs to make sense. You don't want to hurt people in the process, but you need to be so mindful about discipline. If you're not going to think about it and you're not going to be intentional about it, then you're probably not going to get to the goals that you want to have for yourself financially, for yourself and your family, or if you have a business, the financial goals for your business.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Something you do for fun that doesn't cost anything.
Play basketball.
Ooh, do you play basketball with your family?
Yeah, we do. My son, he's finally got to that age. He's 19 now, where we've been playing basketball together for probably about 3 or 4 years. But yeah, that's something we'll do as a family.
All right. Last but not least, can you tell us something that you would like to improve about your personal finances in the upcoming year?
Yeah, I think what it would be is to be more intentional about strategizing, to really be more intentional about goals. What do we want to do as a family? And what do we want to do as a business from that standpoint? And then really put those things into place to make sure that we're going to get there. I don't think that I'm strategic enough personally to say, okay, at the end of the year, we want to have this amount of money in the bank, or we want to have paid down this much debt. And I think that's something that would be worth improving upon.
Okay. What's your action item that's going to help you reach that goal?
Oh, dear.
Accountability.
Yeah, maybe this podcast will help to inspire me to greatness along those lines.
Yes, you're going to send it out to all your friends and they're going to say, hey, you said you were going to do that, and they're going to hold you accountable to it.
Right.
All right, we have made it to the finish line. You are standing on the podium. I'm an Olympian, so I like to put people on the podium, not on any championship thing. I'm giving you your medal. Now it is your time to shine. Go ahead and shout yourself out. Tell us where we can find you. Tell us how we can support you. Anything you want to tell the listener that you didn't get to say, this is your time.
One thing I wanted to say, I guess it's a money hack thing that I would just like to leave people with. There's a verse out of Proverbs 24:27, and it says, "Do your planning and prepare your fields before building your house." And I guess what I would like to say to everybody is I think there's a tendency that people have some money in their pocket or even in their business. They have some money there and they think, man, finally I can take that vacation. Finally I can buy that car that I've been wanting to have. Finally we can get into a better house. And I guess what I would just say is I'd really encourage people to hold off on the fancy clothes, hold off on the fancy car and the nicer house until you really, truly have arrived. So you really have got those things in place. And just invest in your business, invest in yourself. If you have money, try to figure out ways to use it. Maybe that could be buying real estate. Maybe that could be some creative ideas, some small businesses that you could do. But do that because that money invested now in yourself, in your business, can really pay a huge dividend for the future. And too often I see people spending stuff on frivolous things right now that really hurts them from getting to the financial goals they want to be, from being financially independent, to being able to retire when they want to retire, to be able to help their family, their kids. I would encourage that so much. Hopefully somebody can listen to this podcast and it'll maybe change the way that they think about money, and it'll be something that they can improve on themselves for the future and their family and their friends.
Thank you for sharing that with the audience. Shawn, it has been great having you on the show. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed listening to Shawn's Money Memoir. He shared some great gems with us that we all need to be thinking about if we're planning on starting or purchasing a business. So don't forget that when you're talking to banks, to remember that relationship and your ability to sell yourself matters. It is not just about the numbers. While it is important to be financially organized, no one's saying don't do that. It's also important to create relationships that are going to allow you to get your foot in the door. He also touched on how much he values the work that his wife does as the primary caregiver for his family, and the importance of viewing her as a teammate when handling the finances. I love that he uses the word value. I think sometimes we get things mixed up when we think value versus cost, and the cost is like what you pay, but the value is something that is far beyond, let's do a bottle of water as an example. You could pay $1 for a bottle of water and think that it was just fine, but you get to a big stadium somewhere and that same bottle of water costs $5 and you're like, this is a ripoff. Well, you value the idea of your throat not being dry anymore. You value not getting sick from being dehydrated. And so you're willing to pay the cost. So think about the things that are very valuable in your life. And sometimes you need to get rid of the cost associated with that. He also left us with a great reminder from the book of Proverbs about getting your finances and your affairs in order. Also, don't forget to practice that delayed gratification. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you found this episode worth listening to. If you have financial questions, suggestions for guests, or would like to share your own money memoir, please do not hesitate to contact us through our website, worth-listening.com.